Shalom, this is Yair, Davidiy speaking to you from the land of Israel. We represent Brit-Am, movement of the tribes of Judah and Israel. We find the lost 10 tribes among Western peoples, and we bring proofs concerning this subject, concerning this belief of ours that the lost 10 tribes are amongst Western nations. We bring proofs of it from numerous sources. We bring proofs from Scripture, from the Bible, from the literal meaning of the Bible, also from rabbinical commentaries on the Bible, or rabbinical sources concerning dealing with biblical subjects, or from archaeology, or from secular sources, history, legends, mythology, linguistics, contemporary affairs, anything which has somehow or other some relevance to the subject, some pertinence to the whole thing that we speak about. We study it, and bring proofs from it, and we learn from it. So one of the avenues, one of the sources of information, one of the sources of proof that we use are rabbinical sources. What Rabbis said on the subject are pertinent, and this is the subject of our present talk. We are now going to speak about rabbinical sources, and we've given quite a few lectures and even almost whole books developed to this subject, devoted to this subject. And we have talked about this quite a lot in the past, so this present talk is more or less to give an overview of what the sources say. And the details, you can find them elsewhere. You can find them in the articles we've written on the subject, or relevant articles, or talks devoted to this, to what we say, to this particular detail. Or we have enough information available to give you all the information you need, and all of the sources that are concerned with it. At present, we are going to give you an overall view, and that is what we hope to do. Should realize that our understanding is that the 10 tribes that were exiled, the 10 tribes were the majority of the Israelite people. So originally 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel were together united in one kingdom under King Saul, King David, King Solomon. Then came the son of Solomon, King Rehoboam, in English transliteration, in the time of Rehoboam, son of Solomon. The 10 tribes separated from the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and they set up their own kingdom in the north, which is sometimes referred to as the kingdom of Israel, as juxtaposed to the kingdom of Judah in the south. It's also referred to as Joseph, or as Ephraim, or as Samaria, but it comprised 10 tribes. It comprised 10 tribes, 10 out of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they were separate from Judah. They were a separate entity. They worshipped idols. They went in the ways of the pagans around them. They distanced themselves from Judah, both culturally and spiritually. And eventually the Assyrians conquered them and took all of them into exile, and in their places of exile they assimilated amongst the nations, and they also lost consciousness of their ancestry. Nevertheless, we have shown that they physically remained together to a reasonable degree, and they moved in groups from one region to another, eventually all of them converging in Western Europe. And this is proven from the Bible, as we said, is proven from biblical sources, from rabbinical sources, and from secular fields of study. And the reason for this, there was a reason for this, for the 10 tribes to lose consciousness of who they were, to forget their Israelite ancestry, because they had a task to perform in world history, a divinely appointed task, to go down to the level of the heathen Gentiles, to, as if to say, devolve unto the level of those heathen peoples who then populated the world, and to evolve upwards, to come upwards in the course of time, and to bring the rest of the world upwards with them. And this, to some degree, they have done, and they're still doing in some ways. And eventually the Jews also are had a task. The task of the Jews was to develop the law, to learn the law, to keep the law, to bring in converts, to also spread awareness of the truth in their own way. And eventually the two halves, the 10 tribes in Judah, will reunite and become one people, as predicted in the Bible, in Ezekiel 37 and in Isaiah 11 and elsewhere. So this is what we have. This is what we have, and this is what there is. So the 10 tribes became peoples who settled in Western Europe, and from there they went on to develop other nations in the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, are also parts of the 10 tribes. We're not saying that everyone in those regions is the centre of the lost 10 tribes. We are saying that the lost 10 tribes are amongst them, and that is where they are to be searched for. To stress this, we are not saying that everyone there is descended from the 10 tribes of Israel. We are saying that is where the lost 10 tribes are. And there may be a good portion of the population in those areas, or they may be a minority. Nevertheless, historically, they were significant. They influenced the national development of these peoples, and that physically they are still in those regions. And in the end times, they will have to return to God Almighty, and also return and reunite with Judah. And how this will come about, we don't know. We don't have to know. It's not our task to work for this. Our task at present is only to spread knowledge of their Hebrew ancestry, so that they know, and the Jews know, and that everyone who is interested also know this truth. So as we said, we have rabbinical proofs amongst other proofs. The rabbinical proofs can be divided into different sections according to their relevance. Sometimes the biblical proofs tell us where they are, who they are, or they may discuss what qualities they should have, what characteristics they had, and from that we can also derive conclusions or use that as evidence, indicative evidence. And also the biblical, rabbinical and rabbinical proofs that are more along the lines of what happened to them, historical observations. From that we can use this evidence or these observations to complement conclusions we've already reached from historical sources. And so this is what we have. We have biblical and rabbinical opinions, biblical and rabbinical proofs, and the proofs are of different nature, of various, variegated nature. So one of the proofs is the book of Obadiah 120, when Obadiah, in the book of Obadiah, it's a biblical book, the book of Obadiah, when he says this first exile which are of Canaanites who are in Zarephath. Okay, so that's what in Hebrew is saying, talking about the first exile, which is, as the Malbim, a rabbinical commentator explained, refers to the exile of the 10 tribes. Also Rashi is a foremost commentator. In the Middle Ages, Rashi said that he is referring to the 10 tribes who went into exile. Rashi expressly says this. Rashi said it is referring to the 10 tribes who were in exile, and they went to the land called France. Zarephath is France, according to Rashi. The Abarbanel, who was also somewhat later, but is also a foremost commentator on this same verse, he also says that the references to France, and as well as France to Britain. And there too he says many of the exiles went to those areas. Nachmanides in the Book of Redemption also says that the 10 tribes in the far north in the land of Zarephath, meaning the Western Europe. So this is what we have. This is evidence in its own right that the lost 10 tribes have to be in that region according to these authorities. Now there's also Jewish traditions. As we said, the Assyrians came and they took away the 10 tribes of Israel, and the 10 tribes of Israel got lost. Meanwhile, the Jews of Judah, the southern tribes, remained. Then they too were taken into exile by the Babylonians, so taken to Babylonia. But in Babylon they did not assimilate with the peoples around them. They remained separate. They remained separate Jews, and they remained faithful to the Jewish faith, to the Jewish religion. And in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, when Cyrus the Persian conquered Babylon, he allowed the Jews to return, and some of them did, and they returned, and they set up a kingdom of Judah, or province of Judah, under the Persians, and they rebuilt the temple, and that was the second temple. After that, eventually, this entity of Judah, renewed entity, one could say, it grew and developed, and they increased and multiplied, and more people came from the diaspora to join them, and also had a very large high birth rate. They increased and multiplied, and eventually they were conquered by the Romans. And in the course of time, they fell out with the Romans. So the Romans destroyed them, destroyed the temple, destroyed the second temple, and scattered them. And so we have Jews who were scattered, but the Jews, they remained. They were scholars, they wrote things, they influenced other people. So we have traditions from the Jews in the early Second Temple period. So we have sources that can be dated to the Jews in the Second Temple period or shortly afterwards. And these sources more or less say that the 10 tribes were believed to be in Western Europe, especially in the British Isles. We have sources which the Arabs derived from the Jews, saying that the sons of Ad were the brothers of Yahud, of the Jews, and they were in Britain and in France. And they had been driven out of the land because of their sins. We also, before that, we had the observation of Josephus. Josephus is famous because he wrote books concerning the antiquities of the Jews, and also concerning the Jewish wars against the Romans. He was a famous historian. He lived at the time when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple, and he gave a commentary concerning Balaam in the book of Numbers 22, chapter 22 to 25. We have the prophecies of Balaam. Balaam was a heathen prophet who came to curse the Israelites. He was hired by the king of Moab and the Midianites to come and curse the Israelites, and he came. And when he tried to curse, only blessings came out. And these blessings are prophecies. And they also concern the 10 tribes. According to these prophecies, he foresaw the future division between Judah and the 10 tribes. Numbers 23:7. He said that the Israelites would be a nation, they would be alone and not with other peoples. They would not be subject to the same limitations as the others. There would be a numerous people, a very great multitude. They were to receive an unconditional blessing. See 23:8, also 23:19 to 20. A portion of them would be governed by a monarch. They would have kings. This is also a blessing. Other blessings to the patriarchs. King will be known for monarchical governments. Some of the 10 tribe nations, or nations amongst which the 10 tribes settled, do have kings. We find the lost 10 tribes amongst the British people and also amongst peoples of Western Europe, and most hereditary monarchs belong to those nations. We know the British have a hereditary monarch, the Danish have a monarch, the Swedes have a monarch, the Norwegians have a monarch, the Dutch have a monarch. So, and they are about the only peoples who still have kings, hereditary monarchs, and this was one of the features of the 10 tribes, or that the Israelites had been blessed with. Also, according to the prophecy of Balaam, their symbols would include a lion and a unicorn. This is what we find in the British coat of arms. They were to dwell according to their tribes, so separated according to their tribes, which we also find that even though they were taken into exile and split up and divided into different sections and moved in different groupings towards the west, they eventually all coalesced, and we find time and time again that indications according to the tribal names and the characteristics and other features, that it seems as if people from the same tribes tended to recoalesce in the same areas. So this was prophesied. This is part of the blessings. They would dwell in the fertile, rich areas. As Balaam said, there would be many waters and in every sea. They would rule the waves, see Numbers 24:7. They would become the most powerful national grouping in world history, Numbers 24:7. They would defeat Edomite nations such as Germany and Japan, see Numbers 24:9. Also, the Canaanites, Rechabites, they were a non-Israelite group who attached themselves to Israel. They would also be exiled with the 10 tribes, and they would return alongside them, as the Jewish commentator, rabbinical commentator Rashi notes, see Rashi on Numbers 24-22. Also, Josephus understood the prophecy of Balaam, or he knew about traditions concerning this prophecy, that it said that the multitude of your posterity, of your offspring, should live as well in the islands as on the continents, that they would be concerned with dwelling in islands. And this is what we do find them. We find them in the British Isles and in Ireland. And they will number more than the stars of heaven, so their very great multitude did emerge from the 10 tribes, according to our understanding. We also find that Ireland in classical literature of the time of the sages, of the Talmudic sages, literature of the Greeks and Romans of that time, and other peoples, in Irish writings, British writings, and so on, that we know that Ireland was known as the Island of the Saints, or Isles of the Blessed. It was this concept was applied to Ireland. In some cases, it was also applied to Britain. And the Jews in the Roman times, as well as Jews in Roman lands, had the notion that the 10 tribes would dwell in those areas, and also the Rechabites and the children of Moses were also to be found in those areas. Both the Rechabites and the children of Moses are other groups found in Jewish mythology, Jewish tradition, and usually they too are associated with the lost 10 tribes. So if you find them mentioned as being in one area, you may assume that the lost 10 tribes were nearby. And this is what we find. According to Jewish Arabic sources, the 10 tribes would be in a place known as Gabok. Gabok usually refers to the area of France or that region. And in addition to that, we also find that the pagan Greeks and Romans also had some type of concept of Saturn, the god Saturn, who represented in their way of thought Israel, the Israelite nation. That Saturn had gone to one of the Isles of Britain, and his descendants or followers were still to be found there. And this too, in its own way, is saying that the lost 10 tribes were in that area. At all events, we find in Jewish thought that there's such a thing as hereditary, that people you derive something from your ancestors, something that your ancestors did or did not do, affects you. Things that your ancestors began, you sometimes merit to complete or to go on. You have inherited tasks or inherited characteristics. So this is a known phenomenon of natural history, but it's also developed in Jewish thought. That we have a thing that we derive from our ancestors. And so Jewish thinkers, Jewish rabbis, they spoke about this quite often. They say that Joseph, remember the 12 tribes, there are 12 tribes. Amongst the 12 tribes, Joseph was predominant. Joseph was to have the rights of the firstborn according to the Bible. Joseph was to receive the major portion of the blessing according to the Bible. Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim was to be before Manasseh, but both of them were to be great nations according to the blessings given unto Joseph and his sons. Joseph is a portion of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham passed the blessing on to Isaac. Isaac passed it on to Jacob. Jacob passed it on to all of his 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob was renamed Israel, and he gave a special portion, a double portion, to Joseph, who had the right of the firstborn, as it says explicitly in Genesis and also in the book of Chronicles. Sfatamet, according to one great Rabbi Sfatamet, Joseph has the aspect of the written law, whereas Judah has the aspect of the oral law, of the oral tradition. And when we understand both halves, we see that there's no contradiction between the two. And eventually Judah and Joseph will become one, and so too the oral law and the written law will be understood as parts of one whole body given to us, given to the Israelite nation. And in reality we find that Joseph is a Bible in English translation. The Western European peoples, especially the English, but also the Dutch and others, were very big on biblical learning at certain periods in their time, in certain historical moments. and this influenced them to a great degree, and they knew the Bible, and they lived according to the Bible, according to their own understanding. And so this is what they had, whereas the Jews had more the oral tradition and the oral law which they developed, which is also consistent with the written law. And to understand the will of God, we need both of them. According to the Sfat Emet, a great Hasidic rabbi, it says that when Judah said to Joseph, "Oh my Lord, let my servant, I pray you," when Judah, that is when Judah came close to Joseph, what happened was that Joseph had been sold into Egypt, had been sold into servitude, and then he had, in Egypt, had become the ruler of the country. He had given food to all of the world. He had saved the world from starvation. He was also a prototype of the future descendants of Joseph, who also have done that. And when he revealed himself to his brothers, or just before he revealed himself to his brothers, there was some type of difference of opinion between Judah and Joseph. So at one stage, Judah came close to Joseph, and Judah said to him, "Oh my Lord, let my servant, I pray you." So, anyway, this expression in Hebrew can be understood to mean, according to the Hebrew, that through me you have rulership. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Joseph and Judah understood that this is what was being said, but their words were recorded for posterity, and this is one of the meanings. And it could be telling us that through the learning and the keeping of the law of Judah, Joseph also is blessed. The Maharal, a great rabbi, he said concerning the lost 10 tribes, he says that they exist only in potential. They are obscured. It is difficult to find them. They themselves do not know from where they will come, or how they will return, or who they are. And they have been exiled physically. They were sent a good distance away, but not only physically, but spiritually and psychologically. They were changed, they were turned, they became another nation, they became a different type of people, different type of entity. And that is why it is difficult for them to acknowledge who they are, and it's difficult for the Jews to comprehend who they are and who they have become. But nevertheless, this is a reality. In the future, this will become clear to everyone. In addition to all this, we also have the figure of the Mashiach ben Yosef, the Messiah, son of David, and the Messiah, son of Joseph, two different figures in Jewish tradition and also in biblical tradition. The Bible talks about a future Messiah who will be descended from King David. This was a prophecy. And this Messiah, son of David, will come and he will deliver the Jews, and he will deliver all of the tribes of Israel, and he will rebuild the temple, and he will restore all things as they should be, and he will fight against the enemies of Israel, and he will save the world. So they developed, from hints in the Bible and other traditions amongst the rabbis, developed also the concept of the Messiah, son of Joseph. The Messiah, son of Joseph, was someone descended from Joseph, or descended from Ephraim, the son of Joseph. He would come and he would precede the Messiah, son of David. He would, as if to say, prepare the way for him. And he would also play a major role in the historical developments of his time. He would help save the Jews. He would help bring the Jews back to the land of Israel, help build up the land of Israel. And he would have certain attributes that, in a physical sense, that would complement the spiritual reality that would be ushered in by the Messiah, son of David, who would come later. And by analysing these sources and also looking at the great commentaries, we see the Messiah, son of Joseph, is in effect an embodiment, an impersonification of the 10 tribes in their places of exile. The Malbim, also a great rabbi, a rabbinical commentator, he says the Messiah, son of Joseph, in the end times will be the leader of the 10 tribes. And so what he is doing, they are doing. And so we find in these later times that, in a sense, the Jews were saved in the Holocaust, saved to some degree. 1/3 of their number was exterminated, but the rest were rescued or delivered through the British and the Americans and other peoples fighting against the Germans. So you could say they weren't doing it to save the Jews, they were doing it to save themselves. Nevertheless, there was something there that they also wanted to deliver the Jews, to deliver the world from the Nazi menace. This is what they did, and after that they helped the Jews establish the state of Israel, even though on several occasions they tried to backtrack. They tried to realign themselves with the Arabs, and to, as if to say, betrayed the Jews on certain occasions, but nevertheless, overall, in overall historical sense, they did help the Jews return to the land of Israel. They did help the Jews rebuild the land of Israel. And after the Jews fought a war of independence against Arab armies, they eventually helped the Jews rebuild the land and establish themselves and build themselves up and become an economic and technological and military entity, a great force in the world, despite their small numbers, despite and the limitations of the small area of land they held. The land of Israel was actually quite small, but nevertheless, Israel, even though it also has a small population, has about 7 million Jews or less, and a couple of million others, Arabs and Christians and other people within its borders. And that is all it has in a small area of land, but nevertheless it is a military giant. It's one of the most powerful nations on earth in its own way, and its technological achievements are also put it up in the higher ranks of developing nations in those specific areas, and scientific advancements and so on, even though it has a lot of faults as well. It could be much better than it is. That's another point. But a lot of what Israel has achieved was mainly due to their own efforts and their own talents and their own determination, their own bravery and their own courage and their own industry and innovative approach and everything. But they also received a great deal of help. They were helped along the way by peoples from the lost 10 tribes. At first, when the state of Israel was established, it received help from France, some help from Denmark, some help from the Netherlands, some help from other nations. After that, the USA began to help in a major way. And even now, the USA helps Israel. It gives money to Israel and also helps Israel maintain its military edge over other peoples. And Israel also gives much back to the USA. It's a two-way deal. The USA also profits from that. But nevertheless, the USA does this, and not so much because it's worth its while, and it is worth its while, but more through altruistic motives, and incidentally, it also benefits. So we have that. And this, in a sense, represents the activities of what the Messiah, son of Joseph, was destined to do towards the end times. And this is what these peoples are doing, and the Messiah, son of Joseph, embodies or symbolises the 10 tribes in their entirety. The Messiah, son of Joseph, is also, according to Rabbi Kook and other thinkers, he represents the Jew, the Israelite, who assimilates amongst the nations and reforms the nations from within. And this is what the 10 tribes have done. So we have this, and this line of thought can be developed and it can be proven, but it is definitely there. It exists. So this too, in its own way, is a proof. We also have historical supports. We trace the lost 10 tribes through archaeological findings, indications in the Bible, legends, linguistics, ancient records, and so on. We can trace them to certain areas. We find that they moved from the land of Israel, from Assyria after being exiled. They moved to the north and they moved to the west. Some of them moved by sea, others moved overland. There were several tracks of migration. Eventually all converged in the west. And they tended to, in their places of exile, to associate with the descendants of Gomer. Gomer, son of Japhet, was a group of heathen non-Israelite nations who the lost 10 tribes was predicted in the book of Hosea. The lost 10 tribes would come out of them, would be part of them. And we find this understanding of the simple meaning of the Bible also confirmed by archaeology, because we find that a good portion of the lost 10 tribes did become associated with the groups associated with the Gemiri in the Syrian writings, that is Goma, another word for Goma. Gemiri is almost the same, or Gamma, as it's referred to also in Assyria. The lost 10 tribes in their places of exile did become associated with these peoples. These peoples gave rise to the Cimmerians, to the Scythians, to the Goths, to other peoples, and they moved to the west. And we find this understanding of ours confirmed by rabbinical authorities. So this too is where we see archaeological findings, references to secular sources confirmed by biblical authorities and by rabbinical commentators on biblical and related subjects. We find that Gomer is a name of the Israelites according to Rabbi Yisrael Alta, the Rabbi of Gur, one of the rabbis of Gur, Beis Israel, he was known as. He was a really great rabbi. I met him at one stage when I was young, and he said this, and this too is the truth. This relates to the historical reality, that the 10 tribes would be associated with the sons of Gomer, and this is historically this is what happened to them. Or Talmudic sages also told us that 10 tribes would go to the place known as the Sampation, or the Sampation River, and beyond it. They also go to areas known as the Clouds of Darkness, to Daphne of Antiochia, and other areas, and all of these areas were historically known places. They refer to specific regions according to historical classical writings from Greek and Roman times, and we can locate these regions. And here too we find certain peoples, specific peoples, usually connected, as we said, to the otherwise known as sons of Gomer, or Gomeri, or Cimmerians, Scythians, and related peoples, and they moved to the north. They moved beyond the Caucasus Mountains into southern Russia, and from there they moved to the west and moved into the British Isles, France, and Western Europe, and into Scandinavia. So this, in effect, is confirmed. It all ties together. We also have matters concerning the future. We have a great rabbi, the Hatem Sofer. He was a great rabbi, a very great rabbi. He lived in the 1800s, but he was one of the giants, one of the legal giants, a great commentator. And Hatem Sofer was known as, and he said that in the end times, the land of Israel will grow, and the land of Israel will come to encompass Western Europe, especially the British Isles. And according to another understanding of what he says, it would or might encompass all of the Atlantic Ocean area, which could also mean all of North America. So this too, it sounds fantastic, but it is feasible that perhaps the lost 10 tribes, when they will return physically and spiritually, but they won't necessarily all come up to Israel, but the areas that they now dwell in will be considered part of the land of Israel. So this is a possibility, and the opinions of rabbis concerning the end times are in accordance with this possibility. So it's worth knowing. We also have another way in which rabbinical scholars help us. They help us when they confirm our understanding of biblical passages. In other words, the Bible says something. The Bible has certain verses. The Bible is in Hebrew. The Bible is also written in a very developed type of Hebrew. The words in the Hebrew language can have several meanings, and the tricks you can play with the way the words are built, verbal constructs, and grammatical associations, and how different sentences are built and interplay with each other, so that they can have several meanings, and all of these meanings are applicable at one and the same time, which makes it very difficult to translate. And even if you do succeed in translating it, it doesn't mean that other people are going to agree with you. You can say it means this and that, therefore it applies in this and that way, and someone says, no, it says this and that according to such and such a translation, which is an entirely different meaning, so you can't apply it in this sense. So, we have biblical verses that we understand could mean certain things that are applicable, are consistent with the lost 10 tribes being amongst Western nations. And we say it means something. has a certain meaning, and we find rabbinical sources that confirm, that affirm our interpretation. And so this is a rabbinical contribution to this study. And for instance, it says in Hosea 11 verse 10, they shall walk, talking about, according to the simple meaning of the verses, the Israelites in the end times, they shall walk after the Lord, it says, he shall roar like a lion. When he shall roar, then the children shall tremble from the west. And the rabbinical translation into Aramaic, that is known as Targum Yohanatan, was one of the translations into Aramaic, which the Rabbis recommended. In other words, they regarded it as reliable. It translates this word in Aramaic from the Hebrew as saying, the exiles from the west shall be gathered together to return. In other words, the exiles from the lost tribes, from the tribes of Israel, will be in the west in the end times. And so too we have another thing, we have another case, Genesis 48:19, and it says concerning Ephraim, that was when Jacob was renamed Israel, was about to bless the sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. So he blessed Ephraim before Manasseh. He crossed his hands over, and Joseph protested because Manasseh was the firstborn and therefore he should receive the priority, but his father refused, and he said, no, Ephraim will have the rights of the prior blessing, the priority of the blessing, though Manasseh also will be blessed. It says in the translation, Genesis 48:19, his father refused, that is, refused to uncross his hands, and said, I know, my son, I know it, he also shall become a people, that is, Manasseh shall also become a people, and he also shall be great. Incidentally, another commentator says that he also shall be great means that he shall be great at a later date. And we identify Ephraim with inhabitants of the British Isles, and we say that the early settlers of the USA came to a great degree from the British Isles, and they came to areas where we find a predominance of people from Manasseh, according to tribal names and so on, and we make a distinction based upon numerous signs and evidence, which is also depends upon rabbinical commentaries to evaluate. And this is another area where the value of rabbinical opinion is worthwhile regarding. At all events, they say that Ephraim would be a powerful nation first, and then Manasseh would become later. And this is what we find, because we find first we had the British Empire, and after that we have the USA. And the USA followed in the footsteps of the British Empire, and in a seamless way it more or less took over from it. It continued its work, such as overseas bases and the international attitudes and so on. At all events, getting back to what we are saying, he says, Jacob said, and he says, he also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother, this is Ephraim, shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. So it says, as it's translated, the King James Version, and seed shall become a multitude of nations. And most other translations also translate the Hebrew in this way. But Onkelos also translated the Bible into Aramaic, and he, like Yonatan, had his translation affirmed or recommended by the sages, by the Rabbis. And he translated this verse as saying that his seed, that is the seed of Ephraim, will rule over the nations. And this is what the people did. This is what the Ephraimites, that is the British people, did have a British Empire, and they ruled over more than 1/4 of the earth. And they also influenced all the other nations around them in addition to this. So we see here how we need rabbinical interpretations to affirm our own understanding of the literal sense of the biblical passages. And we have books. We have about 20 books, maybe more. I forget. We have books quite often. Some of the books are quite good. Some of them are very good, some of them are reasonable. They are all worth reading. They all have valuable information. One of our books is called Ephraim, the Gentile children of Israel, and it has a section concerning the Tudor rose. The Tudor rose was a symbol of the English monarchy. It was introduced by King Henry VII, who reigned in about the 1500s, and he introduced the Tudor rose, which is a rose with red and white petals, and the description of this rose in the Zohar, which was a Jewish holy book, very much revered, very considered a very holy work. And the Zohar in effect describes the rose of Israel, representing all of the Israelite tribes, and the description is like that, or pertinent to that of the Tudor rose. So here too, we have an indication. And this work also has other information concerning the 10 tribes of value. We have the book of the tribes, which shows where the Israelite tribes went to. The tribes, this work, the tribes analyzes and speaks of Israelite symbols according to Midrashim of the different tribes, and it shows how these symbols and these characteristics, also according to Midrashim, can be found amongst Western nations, where we find descendants of the tribes of Israel, with specific tribes having become dominant in certain specific localities. And we have the ancestry, the Hebrew identity of the Celtic nations. It is more historical. It concerns the Celtic peoples. It also speaks about the Celtic language and Celtic namesakes that were to be found among the Celtic peoples. And we have Joseph, the Israelite destiny of America. And this work discusses rabbinical tradition and descriptions of how the tribes of Joseph will be in the end times. And it shows how this description can only fit Britain and North America, which in effect, from this point of view, proves that they too are descended from the 10 tribes of Israel. And it can only refer to them. And we have biblical truth, Genesis and lost 10 tribes of Israel, which shows how the prophecies in the book of Genesis, according to rabbinical tradition and also according to the simple meaning, were fulfilled amongst Western peoples, especially the English-speaking peoples. We have the book Origin, which summarizes all of this, and which is very valuable. And we have To Rule the World, how the British and Americans prove they descend from Joseph and the 10 tribes of Israel. And it discusses the same genre of considerations. And also quotes from Rabbi Abraham Cohen Cook in the 1864 and 1935, and he wrote on philosophical and national matters, and he showed how attributes of the Messiah, son of Joseph, are in effect pertinent to a study of what is happening now and help us identify the peoples of England and the USA as descended from the lost tribes of Israel. And all of our books have something to say on this subject. All of our books are quite valuable. They have valuable information. And much of this information is either directly in whole or in part derived from rabbinical sources. May the Lord God of Israel bless you. Thank you.